Chapter 5. Partnerships. Inside a modest-size office located near the center of Beijing, the capital city of China, a man known to others only as the American began reading a report handed to him from a subordinate. As he read the report, others around him noticed his skin beginning to change color, changing from a slightly tan skin tone from hours in the sun to having the appearance of a wildfire burning inside him. The three other analysts assigned to the mission watched as the American read the report. Names were not very popular, and identities often changed from one mission to the next, but the agent never used a name, leading others to identify him as the American. The other thing many field agents like the American kept tight control over was their emotions and personal history. Carson, who had presented the report, had worked with the American for over a decade on multiple missions. The American knew everything about him from his real name to the name of the first girl he dated in elementary school. Yet he knew nothing outside of work about the American, neither his real name nor where he lived, and he had never seen a real emotion from the man. Now, watching his reaction to the report, he wished that was still true. "Has this been verified?" the American asked after regaining his composure. "Yes, and it appears the information is at the least several weeks old," Carson informed the American, who for the second time began to have fire glow through his skin. Throwing the sheet of paper off to one side, the American announced his frustrations. "I told those idiotic fools in Washington this would go wrong." He began to pace quickly from one side of the room to the next. "Eliminating Kim Jong-un, great! Make it look like the Chinese did it, even better. But to give them a real EMP device to detonate over our own country?" The American shook his head back and forth in disbelief. In an attempt to calm himself, the American took in a deep breath and slowly exhaled while looking down at the paper on the floor. Why wouldn't they seize an opportunity like this to attack? He made this a statement more than asking a question. "As you know, little information is coming in from the United States, but as the new information has indicated, it was a two-prong attack, all along the west coast and along the west bank of the Mississippi River. The military installations in that area had no warning and were effectively devastated by China's new supersonic missile system. We have also had reports come in that the U.S. Navy has suffered a great number of losses from the same system," Carson followed, providing the new intel that had slowly made its way to their small office. Seconds passed as the American stood, staring out the office window overlooking the Chinese capital, before addressing the information Carson had just presented him with. "Okay, now we do what we can from here. We need to continue the appearance that everything is going just as it was planned. Our main goal here is sabotage. We hit them wherever we can and for as long as we can." The American once again spoke and acted much like his normal self, even with fire still raging beneath his skin. "Where do you want to start?" Carson asked, eager to begin the new mission. "See what you can find out about the troop buildups and supplies here. I'm going to speak with Chi." After a short drive, he fought not to showing his frustration over being made to sit and wait for Chi to see him. The American struggled internally to control himself. Not since his first days with the agency had his emotions been so hard to control. During that time, he saw just how dangerous they could be, not only to himself but also to the mission. Since those days, he worked at suppressing his emotions and replacing them with other useful abilities, such as situational awareness. At the moment, the skill he had worked on for decades was telling him something big was happening. He worked quickly to take in all the information he could from the happenings of the room around him. An increased number of armed personnel were the first thing he noticed upon entering the building, and since being directed to have a seat, the next was the number of eyes watching him. Normally, no matter where he went, people averted their eyes. Now they did so not directly but through their peripheral vision. The more he sat taking in the world around him, the more red flags appeared. But to those watching him, all they would see was a calm, almost bored-looking American. "He will see you now," the receptionist said in flawless English. Pretending to be startled, the American acted as though she had sneaked up on him as he said, Oh, okay, great." Standing, he brushed the wrinkles from his slacks before signaling to the receptionist he was ready, fully aware that the beautiful woman was not the receptionist she pretended to be. He also understood that, in a place such as this, even the janitors were well-trained agents. It was just how things worked. Much like how his attention was drawn to how gracefully the receptionist walked as she led him to the elevator, everything was formulated to serve a purpose. Pushing the button for the elevator, the receptionist waved her hand, directing him inside when the doors began to open, and at the same time, she tried to draw a name from him. "Here we are, mister." "Yeah, good luck with that, lady. Your walk wasn't that nice," he thought as he simply said, "Thank you," and walked by her to enter the elevator. Stepping inside the empty elevator didn't mean he was alone. From the moment he entered, he figured every device imaginable was listening, scanning, or recording video of him before the doors even closed. Like many times before, he stood in the center staring at the door, giving the impression it was just another visit. Ding. The elevator sounded as it stopped, and the doors opened to a large, mostly empty room on the 4th floor. Stepping from the elevator, he spotted Chi standing close to the window, looking out. "How are things progressing today?" he asked Chi, putting just a touch of interest in the tone he used. Turning his attention from beyond the glass, separating him from the outside, to the American, Chi responded, "Progressing nicely, my friend." As Chi spoke, the American noticed a hint of pleasure in the tone. "How can I help you today?" Chi asked as he reached for a cup on his desk that the American could only assume was some type of tea. Noticing many faint behavioral changes in Chi from their countless other interactions, the American decided to use a little of the information he had received from Carson. "I've received reports that China has invaded the United States. A wise move, attacking while the United States has been crippled." While the words passed through his lips, he struggled to not lash out at Chi. "Yes, Command thought it a useful opportunity that should not be wasted," Chi replied, taking a sip from his cup while keeping eye contact with the American. The American could feel something was happening here, but he just could not put his finger on it at the moment. He stood staring at Chi as he took another sip, still not saying anything but letting the long pause linger. While staring at Chi, waiting for him to speak, he used every sense he had to gather more information about his surroundings. With the room being large and for the most part empty, it did not take long. The only thing about the room he had always been curious about was where the door to his left went. "Your information is old. That began shortly after our successful mission in North Korea. I do hope your command is happy not to deal with Kim Un any longer," Chi said with a pleased grin on his face. "I can't imagine your troops have met with much resistance with communication so disrupted," the American said calmly, hoping to push the conversation forward, leading Chi to believe he really approved of China's action. Chi also studied the American closely as he spoke, just as he had watched the readouts of his body's vitals, X-rays, and videos while he was in the elevator. "Oh, they are not all ours. The majority of those we sent were North Koreans. At least the first wave was. They were very unhappy with Americans assassinating their supreme leader. They are truly simple people," Chi said, unable to hold back a short laugh. "Well, brainwashing will do that to a person," the American remarked, still holding back his need to strangle the man in front of him. While he spoke, his mind raced in an attempt to formulate a new mission to forward his usefulness to the Chinese. Staying in the loop would be the only way to move freely enough to sabotage the Chinese war machine. Suddenly it came to him. Chi didn't say anything about an attack on South Korea. That could be the opening I need, the American concluded from the information gathered in the short conversation. "I have a plan for taking over South Korea with few casualties. The only thing needed would be for me to—" Chi cut the American off as soon as he finished taking another sip from his cup. "That will not be necessary. That problem has already been concluded. Apparently the Supreme Leader had a standing order to use atomic truck bombs in Seoul and at Camp Stanley. They may not have been big, but they were effective at killing most of the American and South Korean troops," Chi told the American, as he closely watched his reaction to the news. The American stood staring at him, and Chi admired the discipline the man had over his emotions. "You see, my friend, we will no longer be working together," Chi said, resting his cup back on the desk. As soon as the words were spoken, the door to his left opened, and two men walked out. both with eyes fixed on the American. The American imagined red flags popping up everywhere, warning him of the threat now closing in. "What is this, Chi?" he asked forcefully. Chi's face became emotionless and cold as the two men stopped at either side of the American. "I think you were very surprised to find that the EMP you supplied to North Korea worked. It was hard for our scientists to find the flaw in the design, but with proper motivation, they did a good job." The American knew there would be no use in replying or asking questions. Now it was just time to see what happened next. "Nothing to say, Mr. American? Well, bring him over to the window," Chi ordered the two men, who took the American around the upper arms and walked him over near Chi for him to look out the window. Chi didn't say anything as the men held him near the window. "What? Am I supposed to enjoy the view?" he asked, looking out at the other buildings in the area, before noticing Chi was looking down to the ground. Following his line of sight to the ground, the American almost gasped at what he saw. Carson and two other agents, all three on their knees, and behind them, soldiers with pistols to the backs of their heads, awaiting orders. Looking over to Chi, the American addressed him in what came close to a pleading tone. "Chi, we can work something out. It does not have to play out this way." "Oh, but, my American friend, it does. I know all about your plans to conduct sabotage, and this ends it." With the last few words Chi spoke, he turned away from the American and back to the window, where he gave a nod to the men down below. The American's mind raced, trying to figure out how Chi knew what he had just spoken about only hours ago. With the first shot, faintly heard through the thick glass, none of that mattered as he watched his fellow agent pushed forward by the blast of his executioner's pistol. Seconds later, the second pistol fired with the same results. Now kneeling on his knees looking up to him was Carson, a man he felt at times he knew way too much about. But at this moment, he thought he would have liked to know more. With the distance and glass between them, he watched as Carson's face erupted like a volcano of blood and flesh before the sound of the shot registered in his ears. Now he understood what the wait in the lobby was really about. With the execution of the three men complete, Chi turned his attention back to the American. "I think it is only right that this American join his comrades down there and see that they are not kept waiting." The American put up no resistance as the two men held tightly to his upper arms, guiding him to the elevator. "Just so you know, it is annoying addressing somebody by where the person is from. Have a good day, American." Chi let out a laugh at his little joke. The American stood staring up the ceiling of the elevator, providing no resistance to the two men leading him to his execution. By taking a breath in and slowly releasing it, then repeating, the American seemed to be making peace with the world around him. At the same time, the two escorting him relaxed, listening to his breathing, something that he noticed just before the elevator went ding, signaling they were at the ground floor. This also acted much like the bell sounding for a fight to begin. Only the men to his left and right were unaware. The American reached up, grabbing the men's ties simultaneously, and stepping back as he pulled down on both, causing their faces to crash together. Reeling from the pain, both men released their grip, only to have the American grab them by the wrists. Using the grip he had on the left man's wrist, he pulled the man's arm down while bringing up his right knee. As his knee made contact with the man's head, it flew back as blood gushed from his nose and his eyes rolled back into his skull. Quickly, the American sent the man to his right back with the same action. The two men lay bleeding and unconscious as the doors fully opened to the lobby where the receptionist stood, pulling the trigger on her pistol. Instinctively moving to one side of the elevator to avoid the shot, he knew he was not successful by the burning sensation coming from his side. But the pain was not enough to keep him from pushing off the wall toward the open door for a Hail Mary at the receptionist. The instant he exited the door, two more flashes came from the end of the receptionist's pistol. With the adrenaline flowing through his veins, he wasn't sure if they struck him or not. He only knew he had to get his hands on her gun. Grabbing the barrel, he felt, heard, and saw the flash of yet another bullet being fired as he twisted it from her hands. Even with his ears ringing with dying frequencies, he could still hear the bones in her fingers break as he twisted them back with the pistol. With the pistol free, he took aim, firing one round into her face, stopping the screams due to the broken bones. Gunshots seemed to come from all directions, and the bullets that had been fired sizzled through the air around him. Doing his best to focus, the American knew from his time here that the front door was the only way out, but he also knew if he ran straight for it, he might as well shoot himself now. Off to the right looked to have the most cover, with its evenly spaced square columns. The American wasn't sure just how many rounds were in the pistol, but he wasn't going to take a chance running out. A man headed toward him from the direction he was going, and with every step he took, he seemed to fire a shot, but none came close. Almost as gracefully as a dancer, the American brought his pistol up, firing one shot and striking the man in the head, killing him instantly. Seeing the man's pistol slide across the floor, he had to fight the urge to retrieve it to avoid exposing himself to even more open space. Forward, he ran to the first column, and then to the next, where he surprised another Chinese agent waiting on the other side with a hot bullet to the chest. Dragging the man behind the column, he searched through his pockets for items to use, namely a keycard because he was all but sure the door was electronically locked by now, along with any ammunition he had. Within seconds, he had what he needed: 2 full pistol magazines, another pistol that he slid into his waistband, and most importantly, the keycard. Now he decided to make a run for the door, and his body seemed to already be in motion before he had decided to go. Firing once, twice, ducking behind a column, firing once again, and closing the last 10 feet to the door, the American prepared the card in his left hand for the scanner. Bullets struck all around as he swiped the card for the 3rd time. Success. The door latch tripped, and while firing 2 more shots, he exited and ran. With every step, he tried to call up more energy from down within himself. He knew it was stupid, but now he had a point to make as he ran in the direction of his fellow agents, faceless on the ground. Running around the last shrub, the American took aim and squeezed the trigger. Once, twice. The slide locked back before he could fire at the last executioner. The man stood confused by what had just happened to the 2 men beside him. That slight hesitation was all the time the American needed to pull the pistol from his waistband and fire, placing the bullet just between his eye and nose. Not seeing any immediate threats in the area, he slowed down and looked up to the window where Chi was planning on watching his execution. He smiled up at Chi staring down at him, took aim with the pistol, and then fired. Chi didn't move a muscle as the bullet splattered harmlessly on the glass in front of him. He knew the bullet would not penetrate the glass, but it still gave him great satisfaction. Turning his attention back to the bodies of his fallen co-workers, the American stopped next to Carson's body. Looking down at the only person he could even come close to calling a friend, he said softly, "The name's Adam. My friend. Adam."